I am Wendy Hanamura of Link TV, one of the only independent media outlets here at the Democratic National Convention. There are 15,000 journalists here, mostly from the mainstream press. Behind me, Dan Rather, one of the icons of the mainstream press, now one of its most potent critics, is talking. Let's hear what he has to say.
What has changed most is the character of news ownership. I only found out years after the fact, for example, about the pressure that the White House of the late President Richard Nixon put on my then bosses during my coverage of the Watergate crimes. Pressure to cut down the length of the pieces. Pressure to call me off that story and so on. Because back then, my bosses took the heat, so I didn't have to. They did this so the story could get told and so the public could be informed. This was in the mid-1970s. But it is rare now to find a major news organization owned by an individual, someone who can say, in effect, the buck stops here. I've said it before, I say it again, that now the more likely motto is, the news stops with making bucks. America's biggest, most important news organizations have, over the past quarter of a century, fallen prey to merger after merger, acquisition after acquisition, to the point where they are now tiny parts of immeasurably large international corporate entities. Entities whose primary business often has nothing to do with news. Entities that may at any given time have literally hundreds of regulatory issues before multiple arms of government concerning a vast array of business interests that have nothing to do with news. These are entities that, as publicly held and traded corporations, have as their overall reigning mandate to provide a return on shareholder value, to increase profits, and not over time, not over the long haul, but quarterly, if not on a tighter schedule. One might ask where news fits into this model. And if you really need an answer, you can turn on your television, where I suggest to you, you will quickly see some, if not all, of the following. You will see and hear political analysts reduced to in-studio shouting matches between partisans armed with little more than the day's talking points. Precious time and resources wasted on so-called human interest stories, celebrity fluff, sensational trials, and gossip. So-called political debates, I put it in quotations, where the one thing that is sure not to happen is genuine debates, and where the questions that the public really cares about seldom, if ever, seem to get asked. And you will see and hear international coverage that leaves the American public ignorant of the world outside our borders, unaware of its complexities and the ways that U.S. interests are bound with those of other nations. Does the American news audience know, for one example, that the concern among foreign policy elites in this country over the situation in Georgia has everything to do with major gas and oil pipelines constructed there with U.S. backing against Russian protests? If the American public remains unaware of this fact, in the whole and in the main, after the broad but shallow coverage of recent weeks, ask yourself, who is to blame? I could go on, and I know you'll be relieved to know that I won't, cataloging journalistic sins of which I know you're all too aware. But all of these things, these failings, pretty much come down to this. In the current model of corporate, big international conglomerate corporate ownership, the incentive to produce good and valuable news is simply not there. American journalism is in need of a spine transplant. Let the treatment begin today with those of you in this room. You can take this message home with you. You can take it back to your desks and your workplaces, to your colleagues and your fellow citizens. Magnify it, multiply it, and spread it. Make it something that cannot be ignored, not by the political parties, not by our candidates, not by the owners and executives of media companies, write these people, call these people, send them the message that you know your rights. You know that you are entitled to news media as diverse and varied as the American people, and that you deserve a press that provides the raw material of democracy, the good information that Americans need to be full participants in our government of, by, and for the people. And most of all, show them with your example what a truly independent press looks like, because your country needs you now more than ever. Thank you very much.
Dan Rather first started covering political conventions in 1956. That's right, he's been at this business for over 50 years. But what's changed? Well, according to Rather, what has changed is the ownership of the mainstream press. That's right, corporations now own the companies that govern the reporters. They don't back them up, because what's really driving this business, according to Rather, is profits. All the more reason to support independent voices like Link TV. We're going to be bringing you the independent voices at this convention all week long, so stay with us as we cover what change looks like here on Link TV.
Thank you for watching this Link TV special, What Change Looks Like. See the full schedule at linktv.org/change.